India, the rising giant on the global stage, has been steadily climbing towards superpower status, causing concern within China. It is well on its way to becoming the world's second largest economy for years. But how? How could the global financial scene change so drastically? And what threats does India pose to China? Is India's takeover inevitable, or is there some hope left for China still? When all said and done, will India actually be able to counter China's string of pearls strategy? If you're interested in the answers to these pressing questions and more, keep watching. How did we get here? The present-day economic conditions in India and China today weren't generated in a vacuum. A couple of years ago, it would have been inconceivable to think of India as posing any threat to China. In a few decades, China managed to pull its citizens out of the poverty line. Ever since then, there has been a dramatic increase in the quality of life in China, and the economy has boomed like few other economies ever have. What could be the cause of such unprecedented economic growth? To put it in simple terms, companies both within and outside of the US realized that China had a lot to offer to them. It was as if the Western world one day woke up and realized the monumental potential that China had. The Chinese population was a massive source of cheap labor. Manufacturing products in Western countries was expensive. In stark contrast to that, manufacturing was much more affordable in China. Furthermore, China experienced a further surge of growth in 2001. As a part of the World Trade Organization, China began to export globally. Since 2001, there's not a single region without a Chinese manufactured product. Wherever you are in the world, there's a high chance that the products you use have a Made in China tag on the back. Once China opened itself up to the world, its GDP rose to even greater heights. After 2001, China held the title of the world's biggest manufacturing hub. In the years that followed, China's economic prosperity continued. Today, China is the world's second largest economy. But times are changing. Within these changing times, India is emerging as China's competitor. India used to be a nation troubled by economic and political instability. Today, it leads the way in global and economic influence. And it's not only that. India has also positioned itself as a substitute for Chinese manufacturing and production. In the years to come, India could emerge as the world's next manufacturing powerhouse. But how? Let's turn to India's history now. Under British rule, India gained access to self-reliance. As the British built railways and roads, they also prepared India to enter a new, modern age. Still, India battled to free itself from the clutches of colonialism. Freedom arrived after a long and violent fight. By 1947, India was a sovereign state. India's resistance to colonial oppression served as an example. A wave of colonial resistance soon took hold of the world. It was around the same time that China was struggling with its problems. Colonized by Japan, China gained its independence a mere 3 years before India. Do you see the similarities now? India and China entered the global stage as sovereign countries around the same time. Fast forward a couple of decades to the present, and they could not be more different. India-China relations from past to present. India and China were not always locked in a state of conflict. Although it might seem that way today, the two countries were on friendly terms in the beginning. In 1914, Britain, China, and Tibet met in Simla to resolve Tibet border disputes. China declined to acknowledge the borders set out in the treaty. As we will see, China's continued dismissal of the border treaty led to a full-blown war. In 1954, the Prime Minister of India met the chairman of the People's Republic of China. The meeting between Jawaharlal Nehru and Mao Zedong aimed at bolstering relations. During this time, India and China shared several similarities. Both countries were emerging nations and struggling on the global economic front. We refer to these historic negotiations as the 5 principles of peaceful coexistence. To be fair, this is a somewhat ironic name for an event that, looking back, accomplished very little. The leaders decided that they would use a shared set of values that would govern their dealings. Among these were non-interference, preserving territorial integrity, and reciprocal non-aggression. Unfortunately, it didn't take long for both nations to forego these values. In 1962, the Sino-Indian War broke out. The primary cause of this war was a territorial dispute. To this day, the territory of the Western Himalayan region remains a point of contention. India claims the Western Himalayan region, but China controls it. As such, the stretch of land is the source of geopolitical tension between the two countries. Throughout the 1962 Sino-Indian conflict, China was violent and aggressive. Sheltered by the shadows of the night, the Chinese forces advanced deep into Indian territory. They caught the Indian military off guard and launched a war that would last a month. While the war lasted for a month, it soured relations between the two countries for a lifetime. These strained diplomatic relations factor into the present day as well. On the economic front, India-China relations are somewhat better. Being two major nations, China and India are trading partners. Despite sour political relations, both countries engage in bilateral trade. There has been a severe trade imbalance, with China exporting more to India than it imports. India has expressed concerns about this trade deficit. India has made many attempts to reduce its dependency on China. Unfortunately, these attempts haven't been very successful. Instead, the trade deficit between India and China keeps on increasing. As of May 2023, India's trade deficit with China accounts for 38 to 40% of India's total trade deficit. Despite this large deficit, things are looking up for the Indian economy. In a strange turn of events, we cannot make the same claim for the Chinese economy. With each passing day, India continues to ascend the global economic landscape. While China is still the world's second largest economy, India is well on track to join its ranks. In all fairness, India does have the upper hand now. Ever since the COVID-19 pandemic, China's economy has been spiraling downwards, whereas India is well on its way to becoming the next, better version of China. Economic and manufacturing threats. Remember when we mentioned China's role as the world's manufacturing hub? It's a fact. China's GDP skyrocketed thanks to its manufacturing industry. Companies worldwide flock to China. China's attraction lies in abundant cheap labor and comfortable policies. In the present, China has shifted its emphasis from manufacturing to foreign investments. This, in turn, has reduced the allure for foreign businesses. Earlier, companies found favorable operating conditions in China with minimal government interference. But all that changed when President Xi Jinping introduced some controversial policies. These policies gave the Chinese government more control over businesses within its borders. Amongst the most controversial were the anti-spying laws. These laws allow the Chinese government to seize data from businesses. Under the guise of security, China would gain unlimited access to the business's data. These laws and their unrelenting imposition revealed China's authoritarian side to companies. Not only did these data laws raise concerns about the Chinese government, they went further than that. It was clear that China manipulated its position as the global manufacturing hub. For many companies, China is at the foundation of their manufacturing and production. China's enforcement of unfavorable laws revealed that this foundation was all too fragile. In short, companies could no longer trust the Chinese government. China's unpredictability makes it an uncertain business environment. In contrast, India offers a democratic alternative with favorable laws for manufacturing investments. India introduced the unified GST system, simplifying taxation and streamlining the process. Furthermore, India introduced the Make in India campaign. This campaign promotes manufacturing by easing regulations and improving infrastructure. The Indian government, in glaring contrast to the Chinese government, provides incentives. India creates the perfect conditions for desperate companies to set up manufacturing units. India also stands out due to its young and sizable workforce. Where China's population is aging, India boasts of a younger population. A majority of India's population is of working age, with the median age being 28.2 years. For China, the median age is much higher, at 39 years. While a majority of India's population is working age, China's population is much older. China also faces a youth unemployment crisis. With each passing day, more and more Chinese youth turn away from factory work. Now, this is a problem that India can help address. Unlike China, the Indian populace is eager to provide cheap labor. Companies such as Samsung, Foxconn, Microsoft, Google, and Apple are flocking to India. To put how big a deal this is into perspective, consider this. By 2027, India will produce half of all Apple iPhones. Geopolitical threats. It's not only about the economy. India also poses a significant geopolitical threat to China. Extending to China's Belt and Road Initiative, these geopolitical threats could permanently alter the Indochina region. India poses such a danger to China mainly because it recognizes the strategic importance of the maritime choke points. It is through these choke points that India can control China's trade within the Indian Ocean. In the past, through the Belt and Road Initiative, China targeted these choke points, and now India is doing the same. If India gets access to the Strait of Malacca, it can sabotage China's maritime trade routes. And it's not only that. India recognizes the potential it wields. To prevent China from gaining the upper hand, India has launched a unique strategy. Slowly, India is creating a network of military and trade alliances encircling China. Collaborating with Japan and Mongolia, India is securing access to China's mainland. The Indian government is also investing in ports, such as Chabahar in Iran. This was a calculated move to counter China's string of pearls strategy. India has also been making strategic economic investments. These include the $1 billion credit line to Mongolia. If China's push ever came to shove, India has defenses in place. Do you think India poses a significant threat to China? Share your insights in the comments below. And as always, we'll be reporting on how this situation plays out. Thanks for watching, and make sure to keep an eye out for our next video.